There's a lot to it. It's not just being smart or being the best athlete or being the best looking. It's what's inside of you. 1 in a million is not 0. So if your chances are 1 in a million, which they are in just about anything you might try, that means you stand a chance. You really can't control what the outcome of your effort is going to be. You can only control your effort. All the successful people that I've met, they're not people who never failed. They're people who never let failure stop them.
Welcome back, or welcome to the Finding Mastery podcast. I am your host, Dr. Michael Gervais, by trade and training a high-performance psychologist. And today, I want you to ponder a question that goes to the heart of human ambition and resilience. What drives us to pursue impossible dreams, to fail repeatedly, and to keep trying? Our guest, former NASA astronaut, Dr. Mike Massimino, embodies the spirit of never giving up. Despite a fear of heights, bad eyesight, multiple rejections from NASA, and a host of other setbacks, Mike's unwavering determination led him to embarking on multiple spacewalks, repairing the Hubble Telescope, and sending the first ever tweet from beyond Earth's atmosphere. How about it? But how did he maintain his persistence? What psychological skills did Mike need to master to face down failure after failure and keep reaching higher? This conversation isn't just about outer space. It's about the space within us that holds the power of persistence, teamwork, and awe. Mike's journey from a New York neighborhood to NASA astronaut is a testament to the extraordinary feats we are all capable of achieving. His story is a beacon of hope for anyone who's ever been told they can't. And he's here to share the wisdom gained from a lifetime of looking up and stepping forward into the unknown. As we embark on this journey with Mike, I hope you'll be inspired to see your own challenges a little differently. So with that, let's dive into this extraordinary conversation with Mike Massimino. Mike, I am so stoked to sit down with you. And before we get started, just how are you?
I'm all right. How are you doing, Mike?
Yeah, I'm good. When you say all right, what does that mean?
It means I'm A-OK.
It
means everything's fine. I'm doing okay. I'm hanging in there. It's a busy day, but trying to get things done. It's getting close to the holidays. So, but no, we're managing, doing well.
Look, your body work and what you've done, like, it's incredible. From, I could stop after the first one, PhD from MIT. Like, okay, but then Nobel Prize winner?
No, I'm not a Nobel Prize winner. I'm not a Nobel Prize winner. No.
How did I get that wrong?
I don't know. Talk to the publicist. No, I'm not a Nobel Prize winner. Maybe you want to get another guy in here. No, I worked on the Hubble, and I think where that confusion came from was that I installed an instrument on my first spacewalk, or actually my second spacewalk on my first flight, that was the advanced camera for surveys that was used for the discovery of dark energy. They thought that dark energy existed, but they needed to take some more readings to verify and confirm that. And so we installed this instrument that they used to confirm the existence of dark energy, and that led to the awarding of the Nobel Prize for the astronomers involved. So the work we did gave them the tools they needed to make that discovery. But no, the Nobel Prize in Physics, I have not won that. That went to 3 astronomers, although they're very appreciative. When I see them, occasionally I'll see these guys from that team, and they'll say, oh, thank you very much for what you're doing, and we couldn't have done it without you, and thanks for risking your life and all that. But they're not going to share the Nobel Prize. That's theirs. So I just want to make really clear that I did not win the Nobel Prize. Yeah.
You know what's really good about that is like, okay, sorry for the miscue, and I feel a little bit better about myself.
Yeah, I really haven't done much then. I wouldn't worry.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you got. I think it's my publicist was a little overzealous with my biography on that. Yeah, that's not your fault. So yeah.
No. Okay. Good.
That's what was told to you, but it's
But it does not take away PhD from MIT.
I've tried to correct that, Mike. Yeah, but that's different than the Nobel Prize.
That is different, right? Yeah.
Now no one's going to want to listen anymore. Like, oh, we thought
yeah.
this guy.
Now we're throwing
this
it out
guy's
the window.
anybody.
Yeah.
No wonder
Oh
anybody
my
can
God.
not win the Nobel
anyone
Prize.
can go to space a couple times.
Anyone can not win that. It really takes a lot of effort to win the prize, but not to win the prize is not a big deal. But we did, I think, contribute. What we did in space contributed to that discovery, which led to the Nobel Prize. So that's why.
Did you always want to be a spacewalker?
I wanted to be an astronaut since I was a little kid, but once reality started setting in, and I'm old enough to remember Neil Armstrong on the moon, so I was 6 years old when that happened. But by the time I was like 8 years old, I kind of crossed it off the list of possibilities. I grew up in a nice working class neighborhood. People worked hard and had good parents and all that, but it wasn't like I knew anyone who would grow up to do anything like be an astronaut. That seemed a little over the top. I was afraid of heights. My eyesight went bad when I was young, so I needed glasses at an early age. And I didn't see myself growing up to be Neil Armstrong. So it's something that I was always interested in, but I never thought it would be possible. How do you do stuff like that? And it wasn't until I was in college that I started thinking more about just working in the space program. And I was saying what I want to do. And I didn't do much about it. Right after college, I waited a couple years, but then I went to grad school and started to pursue not only the astronaut program, but also a career in the space program. I thought that was doable. Now, becoming an astronaut, I thought still was impossible, but I thought at least I could do something in the space program.
Were you, like, growing up, were you the neighborhood underdog, or were you like, that kid's gonna do something special? You guys what? Like, that kid, hey, Mike, you're different now. Like, you're different than everyone. You're gonna do something special.
I don't think I was the underdog, and I don't think I was the guy they thought was going to do anything special either. I think what happened is I'll give you an example, Mike. When I went back to my elementary school, right? This is back in I was 35 years old. I'd been an astronaut for a couple of years, so some of my teachers were still there. Right, my fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Oko, was still there. She was a young teacher when I had her, and now she was more seasoned. And so I had lunch with her. And when I saw her, she said, my sons, she had two boys, and she said, I think they were like 10 and 12 or something like that. And she said that she told her kids when they were having breakfast that I'm gonna see one of my former students, and he's an astronaut. And so one of her sons said, "Wow, he must have been really smart, right?" And Mrs. Oko said, "Well, I'm sure he was bright, but if he was really smart, I would have remembered." So I don't think, I wasn't the smartest kid in the class. And then she went on to say, but that's not always I told my sons that's not what's important, what's important is hard, other things, like working hard and doing your best and things like that. And so I think I was seen more like that. Although I will say, though, Mike, that one of the things that did help me and encourage me is that, along the way, there might have been people that, didn't think that good things could happen or, weren't necessarily encouraging, but I tended not to listen to them, which I think was a smart thing. But I did have a couple teachers along the way and other people that I encountered that did maybe see something in me. I don't think it was like everybody, but I had a social studies teacher. I remember when I was in 11th grade, my parents came back from like the parents teacher day night or whatever it was, they meet your teachers. And they had said, your social studies teacher, Mr. Stern, thinks quite highly of you. And I'm like, really? And he said, he thinks you should go to an Ivy League school. I'm like, what? That was like the first time that thought was even put in my mind. So I think that it's I think important to try to maybe not believe all the bad things that people say and try to, or if they say, no one really said anything bad, but in my case, but it wasn't like, you're destined for greatness. I don't know if we really know that, because there's a lot to it. It's not just being smart, or being the best athlete or being the best looking. It's what's inside of you. And it's hard to see that. People don't know, they can't, really see what's inside of you. Some people do see it, like a teacher or someone else that might see something in you. And luckily I've had enough of those things along the way where it was, and it inspired me to try things and to keep going. But to answer your question, I don't think there's anything, I don't think anyone would say, I think if you would have told my friends or whoever, anybody, any of my teachers that I was going to grow up to be an astronaut, they would have been in disbelief. So
that's cool, man.
Including me, cool, I would have been in disbelief back then too.
Yeah. What I hear you saying is like, you're just kind of rolling. You're kind of like following the breadcrumbs and doing your thing. And, like, and then I don't know, 30, 40 years later, you remember a moment where somebody said to you, you could fit in one of the greatest institutions on the planet.
Yeah, that wasn't 30 or 40 years later. I think that seed was planted. So I went to Columbia as an undergrad. I thought, maybe I can go to a really good college. Maybe I can do better than I thought I could. And it was interesting too, even at Columbia, somehow I got an interview with the dean of admissions. And if you look at my my GPA was okay, my class rank was good, my SATs were okay, but there was really nothing that special. I played basketball, but I wasn't going to be an athlete at the school. I played in a band, but I wasn't going to be a musician at the school. I wasn't coming in like with anything that would be extraordinary. And my academic record was solid, but it probably was sort of below average for who they would take. But I think that dean of admissions that I interviewed with, his name was Roland Hentz. I think he saw something in me, and they let me in the school, and I think they're happy about that now. In retrospect, there's a lot of schools that rejected me.
Yeah, right.
I got rejected by a lot of schools too. It was a big drop off there, but I got into this. I was fortunate enough to get into the school that I wanted to get into. I think that was my first choice, and I'm always grateful. That really changed my life. I think that changed my thinking about things, because going there kind of took me out of my little neighborhood that I grew up in and showed me what was possible at an institution like that. So I think that it's I wouldn't say that I don't know. I mean, you think back, maybe we can all picture people that we thought were going to be super successful when they were young, and maybe some of them have become. But for the most part, you never really can tell. I don't think it, because things happen, and you have to have some perseverance and grit, and be willing to take a chance and keep going. And I think that's what worked for me. I had this lofty goal of being an astronaut, and really, I wouldn't be the person you would think that could go and do that if you met me at any point in my life, really. But I had the dream, and I really wanted to do it. And I think there's, if I can do it, anybody can. It wasn't anything special about me, that's for sure.
Okay. So I read that you grew up with a fear of heights.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's interesting to me. And you were rejected from universities. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you were rejected 3 times before becoming an astronaut.
Mm-hmm.
So this is as much about like, how did you work with rejection? How did you work with the vulnerability of putting yourself in a situation again and again and again? I don't want to preload an answer in any way. Like, just with those conditions, if I just did a blanket question, like, how did you do that?
Well, one of the things I write about is that I came to the realization that 1 in a million is not 0. It's just a small number. So if your chances are 1 in a million, which they are in just about anything you might try, that means you stand a chance. And I felt like what I was trying to do was somewhat impossible. There was a moment when I was in grad school and I was taking a study break, and I turned on the TV and the Academy Awards were on, and they were doing a downlink with the space shuttle. And so the astronauts were kind of goofing around, floating around with a Oscar statuette with Billy Crystal down on the ground, talking to him. And it was kind of funny, but what got me was I was just looking at those astronauts, and they're floating there on my TV set. And I knew at clarity that's what I wanted to do. There's no doubt in my mind. That's if I could do anything. Not that I would, if I could choose anything to do with my life, that's the one thing I wanted to do was be one of those people.
So I had a hunch that you were going to go to like purpose or like this clarity of a goal. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In that moment, let's go back to that moment when there was a knowing. Was your response to that knowing whatever it takes? Or was your response more like, man, that'd be awesome. I think maybe, I think I'm going to work for that. Like, was it a ridiculous amount of commitment, or was it a bit softer? Like, how did you work with that kind of lightning bolt knowing, or that moment of realization like, oh, this is a direction?
At that point, I had already applied to NASA twice and had been rejected once and was about to get rejected. I knew that I was going to get rejected the second time because I didn't make the interview list. So I knew I was already trying at that point. But the thought that went into my mind after that was, after I said, that's what I want to do, the second thought was, but how are you ever going to get to do that? That's impossible. Real people don't do that. That's such a ridiculous dream. And
wait. This is worth pausing on.
Mm-hmm.
Your first response was, so you had this moment, you had this lightning bolt awareness like that. And then the first response is, yeah, but that's for people that are different.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought that I was going to, I never, like I hear people say they're going to do things and I'm like, okay, but you really can't control what the outcome of your effort is going to be. You can only control your effort. So what I knew was that becoming an astronaut was near impossible. If you look at, like you were reading my back, even without the Nobel Prize, they're strong backgrounds. In fact, we haven't had people who win Nobel Prizes are too smart to become astronauts. Maybe you don't see any of them blasting off into space. They're staying on the ground, helping the planet on the ground. But I knew that it was near impossible, and so I never thought of I'm definitely going to do this. I'm doing that, and like, because some people tell me that, they say, "Oh, I'm going to be an astronaut someday." I'm like, it depends. Maybe if you buy a ticket, they'll let you go, but if you want to go through the NASA program, you're going to have to get selected, and you're going to have to show some humility, and you're going to have to be a team player, and you're going to have to do all these other things. So you can't really just sign up to do something like that, right? So. I always had a respect for the job and for the process, and that I knew that it was a really tough thing to get the opportunity to do. I felt like I could do the job if I was given the opportunity, but there was 1,000 other people that could do that as well. So it was more like my realization was, how are you going to, that's impossible. And what kept me going was that as long as I try, there's a chance. That 1 out of a million is not a zero outcome. It's a decimal point with a lot of zeros and a 1 at the end. And that's what I thought of, is that the only thing I can control is if I try. Because once I give up, that 1 at the end of that row of zeros, what happens, Mike? It's a zero.
Yeah,
the probability of success is zero.
Zero.
And I think about that all the time. This might be unlikely, but it's not impossible. And even if it was, and you need to give yourself a chance to try. And the way I felt about it, Mike, wasn't that I had to become an astronaut, because the reality of that was like, I don't know if that approach is going to work, that you want, but I knew that I would do everything I could to try. And that, I wouldn't do anything that would put me in harm's way or jail or anything like that, do something stupid. Yeah. But I was going to at least try. And they could keep telling me no. I could not control what the outcome was going to be, but I could control my effort. And that's what I concentrated on. And so what kept me going was just the realization that as long as I try, there's a chance. And if I never get selected, but as long as I'm trying, I'm okay. I will accept that they would select me.
Did you really believe that? Like that's
yeah.
You're saying you're saying is like the number of like gold nuggets per like 30 seconds that you've just gemmed shared is like pretty unreal. And so
really?
Like these are, oh yeah, really? Yeah. So there's so much in here. Like we actually have like a real nugget here, not just these like little flakes.
Run with
it. Run with it. Tell me again. All right. So you believed the things that you were saying. These were not just like easy phrases to say now, but you believe them. Like you really believe, if I'm working towards it and the effort towards it is honest and real, and like, it's going to keep that 0.00 whatever 1% available. Like, okay,
right.
Like,
right.
There you go.
And the other thing, Mike, is that what I also felt like is that I felt like I shouldn't do anything just to become an astronaut. I just had one of my students come in yesterday and ask me that he really wanted to be an astronaut and he's thinking of doing this or that. And I'm like, you really shouldn't do this just to be an astronaut, because then you start making choices that might not make sense. And if you don't become an astronaut, then that's not a good path. But I would say even further that by doing things that you're passionate about and interested in will lead you. You have to have like that leap of faith in some ways, that if I do what is right for me and my family and what I'm interested in, and always keep an eye on the goal, though, always keep working toward that goal, But don't do any, like, don't necessarily, like, if I thought I needed to be a fighter pilot to be an astronaut, that probably wouldn't be a good reason to become a fighter pilot, because there's other ways to become an astronaut, and you have to pick the path that makes sense to you, I think, to try, knowing that it might not work out. So I think I thought of it like, I want to do the things that I think will help me be a better candidate for them, but also be the things that I want to do that'll lead me to a better life. And I remember, Mike, after I was rejected twice outright. Then I got medically disqualified when I got an interview my third try. And my fourth try, I got over the medical issue and was able to reapply. And I got another interview, and I was waiting. I was to hear back, right? So I waited about 6 months to get the answer when they're going to announce the class. And in that time period, I remember being on a trip, like a spring break trip with my family. My kids were small, like 6 months old and 2 years old, and they were little. And we were, I was at Georgia Tech in Atlanta, so we went to, I think it was at San Simon's Island there. I'm probably messing up the name, but we were off one of the islands off the coast of Georgia on a little beach vacation. And I remember thinking clearly that, you know what, I've done the best I can, and if I end up right, if they tell me no again, I'm not in a bad spot. I'll keep trying. But I ended up as a professor at Georgia Tech, and family was doing well, and I was in a good spot. So approaching that, you mentioned some of the other things I did do, like get my PhD at MIT. That didn't go well. I failed my qualifying exam the first time that I tried to do that to get my doctorate, and that was a struggle for me. But I hung in there, and I used the space program, the idea of trying to become an astronaut, as motivation to help me do things that I thought were good for me anyway. Like trying to get my PhD, I failed, but I tried a second time and was able to get past it. And then I was able to get there, and then I wanted to work in the space program. I went down to the Johnson Space Center. So I mean, you do things to achieve that goal, and even if you don't get the goal, I think it can lead you to a good place.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because I'll tell you something. It's like a piece of guidance that I got early on that was really remarkable for me. Mm-hmm. But it, like the idea that you're parallel pathing, it's like, it's not even parallel pathing. It's that you're designing your life that if you don't, what's that cheesy phrase? If you don't, go for the stars and maybe you'll land on the
something
moon,
like
or whatever
that.
Is. Like,
Yeah.
Like, it's too cheesy, but the idea that like it's all working inside of a path. And this gentleman said to me, he's like, Mike, you could do a lot now. He goes, you need a hub. And he says, you could do this, that, and the other, da-da-da. He goes, but what are they all going to revolve around? Mm-hmm. I said, oh, right, there you go. So the hub for me was kind of this parallel path that we're talking about for you. The hub was like, maybe one of the spokes that I'm really investing in doesn't totally work, but the hub, which was like helping, using psychology, the psychology of excellence, the psychology of helping people be their very best, was at the center of it. And whether it was going to go into rehab or it was going to go into, the frontier of space or where, it didn't matter. It was like I had a hub. So I could play on the spokes. But the hub was going to keep this thing rolling, no matter if the spokes started to break off or fray or not be useful or whatever. So I really like, there's a crosswalk between these two analogies that we're talking about, but I see how you worked. And right underneath of it, like when you were rejected, like, can you go into one of the moments you were rejected? Maybe use the MIT moment, not rejected, but where you were
failed,
faced with different information, difficult information, failure. Before we go for there, how do you define failure?
You failed if you've given up and you're defeated, but I also think failures, there are failures. I mean, things fail, things don't go well. You fail an exam, I think maybe it's in a different sense, maybe. And I think failure's okay, I think, as long as it doesn't prevent you from moving on. I think that all the successful people that I've met, whether it's in astronauts or people in whatever field they're in, or people in very successful in business, or athletes, or musicians, or whoever, they're not people who never failed. They're people who never let failure stop them, because everyone's going to meet a bad day. And I've had, I did meet one candidate when I was at Georgia Tech. I just had arrived, and I had been rejected from the astronaut program that third time, medically disqualified, and then I took this job at Georgia Tech and moved from Houston there, and I was applying again, And one of the faculty members knocked on my door, and knew I was a new guy and said, "Hey, I heard you applied to be you were like a finalist for being an astronaut." I said, "Yeah, I was." He goes, "There's a guy over in electrical engineering who also was a finalist." I'm like, "No kidding." We interview in groups of 20, and NASA has like 6 groups throughout this however many months. And so there's 120 people that they choose from who are going to be in the class, right? So we both were one of these last 120 people. We're in the same interview group. I didn't know them. But I was like, we got this in common. We're right here. So I rang him up. I was a new guy at the school, and he invited my wife and I and my 2 little kids to go over there. And he had a family. We went to his house for a barbecue. And I was thinking, like, he had it all together. This guy was really smart. Like, when you were talking about the special thing or seeing people that are special or whatever.
Yeah.
This guy was like really smart. He was on his way to tenure. Just a really smart dude. And so inevitably, and he was able to multitask. He was like flipping burgers and supervising his kids at the same time. This guy could do it all. He's a smart guy. So I'm like, so inevitably I said to myself, if they didn't pick this guy, they're never picking me. He got rejected. There's no way I'm getting in. And I asked him, you think you're gonna apply to the astronaut program again? And he puts down his burger flipper, Mike, and he looks at me and he says, "No, I've decided I'm not going to apply again." And I said, "Why wouldn't you try again? Why not?" And he said, "Well, they rejected me once. I figured they're just going to reject me again." And Mike, I really feel embarrassed to tell you, I did not offer one bit of encouragement for this guy. I just shut up and said, "Okay, boy, all right." I didn't want to say, "Yeah, that's a smart thing."
Savage.
I didn't say a damn thing. And usually I would say, "Oh, why not?" But I said, "Just shut up. Just shut up."
Keep it cool. Play cool.
I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be like, "Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, don't apply." I didn't say, "Oh, yeah, you could do it." I just said, that burger's burning. I just stayed away from it. But that dude right there, his probability of success went to 0, and maybe mine went up a tick. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I'm not sure. But
look at
what
that.
were we talking about, Mike? Yeah, I think I took you on a tangent.
I love the tangent.
Oh, failure. We're talking about failure. Yeah.
We're talking about, so to your point, that's failure.
Yeah, that's given. I mean, hopefully he made that for the right choice. He decided it was time.
We don't know how
he
things
was
work.
right. We don't know what happened, right? But
Yeah.
I'm sure he made it for the right reasons. But for me, at that point in my life, to make that decision would have been, no, the game's not over yet.
So the way I operationalize failure is the unwillingness or inability to go for it. And I'm talking about going for something that matters to you, like really matters. I call it a failure if you haven't put in the work, because you're not able now, or you're unwilling because you haven't squared up with the fear to get to the messy edge and to take that vulnerable risk to put it on the line, and so maybe that was what was happening for him, or maybe someone in his family was struggling with a bigger
Who
fight,
knows?
Cancer, this, that, and the other, whatever. Right. So
we don't really
know, but I like how we're framing this is that you are not going to have that be part of your narrative. At least that's
right. No. Yeah. I was going to go down till the end. I'd still be applying this day. I'm convinced of that. I was going to continue to try. And the medical disqualification was disheartening because they wouldn't read my application any longer. That had to be overcome somehow. So at least they could tell me no, that, hey, we've got other people we like better.
Is it Long Island you're from?
Yeah, just outside of Queens, New York, just outside of New York City.
So talk to me about like that neighborhood vibe and how that early community has infused your approach in life.
So some of my friends from that, I still have like my friends from when I was 5 years old in kindergarten. We're still very good friends, and see them quite. Now I'm back in New York. I see them quite often. Relatively speaking, I see them every once in a while at least. So I think it was a place to form friendships, and the schools we went to wouldn't probably necessarily be rated super great, but I thought they were great. I think the teachers, there were a lot of good teachers there. So, but I think, Mike, about what formed me, my father worked for the New York City Fire Department, so he was a fire inspector. My neighbor was a New York City police officer. The guy across the street was a Nassau County policeman as well, and so there was a lot of working class people who were doing things, I guess, sort of in service of others. There wasn't a couple of my friends had parents that went to college. That was unusual. Most were working hard, doing good jobs, and taking care of their families, and that was the most important thing. And I think that rubbed off on me. I think especially from my dad, who never had a chance to go to college, but he was a smart guy, but didn't have a chance to go. And my mom as well was a very good student in high school, but didn't have the chance to go. It wasn't an option for them back then with their families. But so they always encouraged me to do that, and to do whatever I that any activities, and was very supportive of all that stuff. But I think it gave me, as I think of it now, and I think I've only been thinking about this maybe the last few years about it, is it gave me the sense of the importance of service, of doing something that that you do in service in others, or for the bigger picture, for the good of the country or the world. And not that that's because you're supposed to do that, but because that's what's fulfilling in life. That you can get gratitude out of that. You self-gratitude. You feel good about yourself, and you can. And I felt that with my folks, the way they did things around the community. Being involved with different groups around the community and the church and so on. But also from what my dad did for a living as a fire inspector, and as a little kid going to visit the firehouses and meeting the firemen and seeing what they were doing, something that I thought was good. And I felt like getting older, that's what I wanted to do something that was useful. And I think being an astronaut is, to me, my interpretation of that was that it wasn't just flying to space; it was doing something in the service of something bigger than you.
That's what's up. Because you didn't drink the poison of the ivory tower. You didn't drink the poison of like, I'm better than, and the elite, yeah. And you didn't drink it. Like you've carried those core roots from the neighborhood. And like, if I were to just ask a more open question, which is like, what have you carried from the neighborhood? What do you hope the neighborhood knows that you've carried with and for them? What would that be? What have you carried?
I think it was that doing the right thing, working hard, not doing anything really bad, not screwing other people, not being a jerk off, or that those things matter. Being a good person, working hard can pay off. And I think that, my neighborhood friends, and I know there's a few I'm really close with, but there's a lot of them I know, they've just been great. They raised a petition. My friend Anthony Bruno started this, and a bunch of other guys, Billy Sonner, and these other guys that I can start naming names here. But all these Pat Adamo, Joey Milano, all these other guys got together, and they got the street I grew up on, which some of them grew up on as well, as named with my name on it now. You won't get your mail delivered to my name, but it's Mike Massimino Street. It's still Commonwealth Street. But what was cool about that, though, Mike, and I think maybe what you're talking about is that these guys were like, the street should be named after Mass. That's my nickname, and that's what I've been called since I was a little kid. I'm still called that. That's always been my name, short for Massimino. And so they put that, and I was really, to me, that was very meaningful, because that was the people I grew up with, and a lot of them still live in Franklin Square on that street. Right, they're still there.
Yeah.
They raised their friend. They got married and stayed nearby. It's a very nice community, great community. To me, that was really meaningful. And we had this ceremony, and we had a party at one of the guys' houses on the block, and to celebrate. And it was just everybody getting together. And I remember my friend's wife, Billy Sonner's wife, Maria, says, "Mass, look at everybody around here. They were so happy today. I've never seen them. They were so proud of you, what you did." It was like they felt that they were part of the achievement, and they were, because they were part of me, and they took pride in it. So
that statement right there is, I don't want to run over that statement. Like that statement that you provided a sense of people hooking in and being part of, like you've taken them on the ride, and you've honored the early relationships and insights and knuckleheadedness and support, and the way they've really challenged you and what you've carried forward from that. You like that's a big deal now. And that's something that gets, I've squared with this so many times with elite athletes, and like, man, I feel like a sellout, or like, I can't do that. I'd be a sellout. And maybe that is like something that seems very normal for somebody else. And so how do you feel part of something that's big?
Mike, you're educating me. You're absolutely right. This is great, man. No, yeah, I agree. You're right. You're onto something there.
Yeah,
that's
so
where
you've
it came from.
carried
It's
that-
more. It's more than just
Yeah.
a fire department. It's the neighborhood. It was my friend.
That's right.
Absolutely,
And that,
because
I'm
that's what we were
wondering
like.
how-
Yep.
I'm wondering
Yep.
how that when you got rejected from this, that, or the other, or you didn't get in, or you failed the test. Like, how much of that do you consider yourself a fighter or somebody that just figures things out, or are you more like water off a duck? You're more like a duck, where it's like, no, I just keep rolling. Like, no, like, how do you? Because I want to get the weight and the spirit of how you pull the neighborhood in with you. And there's a concept I want to talk about, which is Maorian concept, and it's called whakapapa. It looks like waka papa.
Okay.
And so, but it's this idea that like, no, we're all under the sun together. There's a heritage and a lineage, and how much time we spend under the sun together is like, it could be seconds, it could be days, it could be years. Like, but we're all under the sun together, and you come from a lineage, and that lineage is like meant to give you strength and to know your place in the history of all of the men and women and people that have come well before you. Like, there's a place in this lineage. And so like, I feel like you're living the power of that. And Owen, what a dear friend of mine, he shared this stuff with me, and I was like, holy moly, like, that's rad. And so where am I going with this? Is like, how did you bring the neighborhood forward when you were in the throes of like hard information, like you didn't get the pass or you didn't get the nod?
What you said was, I want to try to get back to that. Let me see if I can get us, because I think it all goes together. The idea of we're all in this on this planet together and so on. But I think as far as the neighborhood went, was that it was this sense of I wanted to be a part of a group of people that would take care of each other, that would always be there for each other, no matter what. And that's what I wanted as much as to fly in space. Because the flying in space, it's kind of cool. Now people pay a lot of money and go up for a few minutes and everything, and that's all right. But that's cool. That's great. I think it's a good thing for many reasons, both for science and for experience and all that. But what I really wanted, as much as the opportunity to work in space, was to be a part of that team. And so I think what you're making me realize, Mike, is that it did come from a very early age.
100%,
seeing my dad and seeing the friends that I had, of having that team around you. And it's really, now it's just starting to freak me out right now, because what I'm remembering is, the feeling when I was a kid. You talked about athletes. So I was an athlete in high school, and there was that certain feeling in the locker room before a game, that you're going to go in this together, and you guys we've been working. We don't know what the outcome is, but we're going to stick together. I love that feeling. And, I played intramurals and did stuff when I was in college, but I never was part of, an intercollegiate team or anything like that. Right. So I remember distinctly of going into the locker room at NASA, getting ready to go into the pool, putting on my fancy long underwear, my cooling garment, and we were about to get into spacesuits and go down underwater and practice a spacewalk. It resurrected that feeling that I hadn't had since I was in high school. And I think that was something I was looking for as well. But I never, until this moment, Mike, do you charge for this, by the way? Until this moment, and I think maybe this is something for the listeners to where you and I are having a conversation, but
right.
But maybe there's something there, because that's where it came from. It came from where I grew up, and that's I wasn't. I really didn't feel that. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me, and because I remember that feeling, and I remember saying it. And I've said that many times actually. That what being an astronaut did was got me back that team feeling, that purpose. So we're going to go and we're going to practice the spacewalk together today. It's going to last the whole day. We're going to go on a flight together. We're going to fly a T-38 across the country, and this is what we're going to do. Let's go get them. That sort of that feeling before, in the locker room, before a mission, before going out to play a game or whatever it is in sports. You have that certain feeling of camaraderie, and we're together on this, and that's the way it was at NASA. And the other thing you mentioned that I thought was cool, and I write about this in the book. There's a chapter called "Be Amazed," and talks about my reflections on the planet. So I'd say how beautiful it is and so on. But the thing that I realized, what you were talking about earlier, when I was on my second flight, this was toward the end of my second flight, after going around the planet a bunch, I realized that my perception of home changed. So when I was a little kid, it was Franklin Square was my home. We didn't really go anyplace. We go to visit, the Bronx or relatives in Brooklyn or something like that. But we mainly hung around the town. So that was my whole world. All my friends, my school, playground, all that was there, right? And then when I went to college, and maybe after college, and I would travel more, I was a New Yorker. I'm from New York. I'm a New Yorker. And then as an astronaut, I went to work with the American flag on my arm, and I identified my home as America. I would, all right, I'm over at this, I'm overseas, or I'm somewhere else. I'm an American. That's who I was. I'm an American. But what hit me, similar to what you were saying, and what I write about, is that something happened to me, seeing the planet in the distance and going around it so often. I realized everybody I've ever known is down there. They live there, or they're there now, or who's going to be born that I'm going to meet. Whoever has lived, as far as we know in the whole universe, now maybe there's someplace else, but right now all we know about is our place. They're all here. Everybody that's ever lived, anybody I've ever known, that's where I live. Everybody has this planet to share, and I think of that as home. When I think of where I'm from now, I think of planet Earth, and it's a place that all of us share, no matter where we're from. We're all from the same place. It doesn't matter where you're from. This is where we're from.
It's like, if you're not careful, it sounds trite, and if you're not careful, and if you're also not careful, you miss the brilliance in it, right? You miss the tenderness and the strength of the global community. And man, how cool! So I've been fortunate to represent USA in across 3 games. Been able to wear, the team jersey, quote unquote, the coach's uniform, and like the last one was in Tokyo, and I didn't get the moment where you're in a stadium and you hear the booing when the USA stuff comes up. But down in Brazil, when the USA, what's our national anthem is played, and the whole stadium is like, "Get out of here!" It's like, and you just look at your partners, and you're like, "Let's go." Let's go. And so, and I think you were responding like, "Oh, that's terrible," but that kind of inner team, inner country, high spirit. This is not a bad spirit. This is like a high spirit about the best of the countries competing with each other.
Right.
It's like there's a magical feeling, but I haven't had that perspective shifter that you've had, which is like, intellectually, I am so down with we are all connected. Intellectually, at a molecular level, I can get down with the spiritual meets, the nano. And at the same time, like, I haven't had that shift to feel what you're talking about. So I want to say thank you for kind of holding the standard a bit higher than nationalism for sure, or the national, things for sure.
Yeah, but well, I appreciate it, Mike. Thank you. Thanks for getting it out of me. That was good.
Yeah, that was really good. Okay. So look, you're the subtitle of your book is really important, right? So the title, obviously, like, it's awesome and it's perfect for you, Moonshot, it's perfect. A NASA astronaut's guide to achieving the impossible. So when you start throwing around the word impossible, my antenna are tuned and I go, right. So I think everything we've been talking about here is really about some of the substrate or the raw material that has allowed you to explore the impossible. And so can you open this up a little bit about how you think about the impossible, some of the ways that you've been talking about it? And I want to drill down into the psychology or psychological skills that you found to be, necessary or required to operate well in extraordinary environments or complicated, consequential environments.
I guess when I think of the impossible, it's like some challenge when you first think of it, or you whatever it might be. It could be something around the house, or it can be trying to do something even with your family, or maybe it's trying to make a huge change in your phase of life to do something different, or go to school, or whatever. Do something that it seems impossible, I think that's when it gets interesting. And that's where you realize it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worthwhile. And is this worth putting in the effort and the time into something that we might not succeed at? We might not end up at the end of the day winning or the outcome that we want, but the pursuit of it is important enough that we're going to give it a go. And then I think there's certain things that I've learned in my pursuit of becoming an astronaut, which is kind of covered a little bit in the book about the persistence part with the 1 in a million that we talked about. Is not 1 in a million is not zero, but also the things that I learned along the way to be successful once you get the job. Because I think, a lot of times we get that position that we want, hey, I've made it to this school or to this firm or this job that I've wanted, or I'm now going to, whatever that opportunity is, and you've gotten it. You've worked really hard to get there. This is no time to relax. It's only, the real challenge is only beginning. Once you're given that opportunity, what are you going to do with it? And I think that the lessons that I learned at NASA were so valuable to me in being able to succeed and get through the missions and the spacewalks and the training and complete the missions that were some of the things that we thought were impossible to do. We were able to accomplish them. And it wasn't that there was anything special about me or any of my teammates or the people we worked with. It's just that we had these certain principles, these certain things that we followed. We had a certain culture that I think was very helpful, and things added to that, things that I learned that helped me get through those tough times and overcome the obstacles. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish here, is trying to help people with the stuff that I stumbled across, learned in different ways over a few decades, trying now to share that, and hopefully it'll be helpful to others who are pursuing something that they find to be difficult or a dream or impossible or whatever.
This is where, if we make some mistakes in sport by looking at the extraordinary performers and saying whether their genetics are different or they've just they're different or have had different experiences or whatever, and then we celebrate them, that's amazing, but we don't think that we could. And so that's one thing I want to highlight, that you're deconstructing that in your approach, being like, listen, I committed to the path, and I've got some really cool stuff that have happened. I've committed to a path. And then once I had the position of being up in space, I'm still committing to a path of pursuing something with purpose. And it's shifted from being up there and running experiments on myself. That's what good astronauts really are, right?
Yeah.
Mini little pin prickers or something. But
I was a repairman with fancy clothes out there spacewalking is what it was.
Yeah. Right.
But in my case, we didn't do a lot of that. We didn't do a lot of some of that stuff. But yeah, you didn't, being a lab rat. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I get you. Yep.
And then the other part is on the sports side is that we can be very intentional that the vulnerability required to be in public athletics is that you don't know how it's going to go. Mm-hmm. And you're out there doing your thing. You're going to make mistakes publicly. Mm-hmm. And you don't know. You don't know if a win's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to get trucked, is a word in football in front of everybody. You're going to get run over, smashed, or drop the ball or let people down and da-da-da. Mm-hmm. So what you're doing though, what sport doesn't do. So I love this vulnerability bit you're talking about, to really be in pursuit of something that matters, is that what sport doesn't do properly is sport is the practice to do something that is purposeful. Winning a championship doesn't hold a whole lot of purpose. All right. So but once you're in a position to have a microphone that has a ton of eyes and ears connected to it, now you've got a platform that can potentially do purpose. You're rewarded with great wealth sometimes. What are you going to do with that? So it falls short of a larger purpose, but it's practice about being part of something that you can't do alone. It's practice about being part of something that has a smaller purpose, but it doesn't have maybe necessarily that transformative purpose for the world or for large communities, unless you're intentional about doing it while you're in it and or using the platform post retirement. But how do you square for folks that like are not part of NASA or an elite exploratory unit in any vein, and maybe are not part of an elite sport, but they're listening right now, and they're a solid manager, director inside a corporation, and you say, look, you've got the impossible for you too, and let's let that be really inspiring. Like, where do you take that narrative? It's like, man, I'm stuck. Like, I'm tired. What are these two talking about? Like, I'm barely getting the kids to bed, and money's okay, but whew, like I'm exhausted. Like, how do you talk to them about a moonshot?
I do speak to various audiences who are out there working hard, whether they're a pharmaceutical company or a tire company or some organization, whatever it might be, whatever they're doing. And I think within that organization there are moonshots they're trying to accomplish as a team, whether that mean a new product or to do better than last year, or to overturn bad news, or to come back from a bad year, or how do you keep the momentum going after a good year, or how do you work this merger that's going on that no one is really crazy about? How do we work together as a team? So I think in your professional life, there's a lot of the team aspects of what I've discovered to help us make successful that I write about or talk about. But then there's also that individual of having your own personal moonshot of where you want to be, what you want to do. And it does seem like maybe that life is hard. Life on Earth is much harder than life in space. Life in space is a lot more straightforward. You don't have to deal with all this crazy stuff happening all the time. It's much easier, and things are taken care of, and it's more linear. It's not as nutty. So life on Earth is hard. But I do think, though, that even though you're not maybe exploring space or playing in a Super Bowl or whatever those things are, I still think the basic principles apply no matter what you're trying to do. If you're trying to do something at work, if you're given a challenge at work that you're nervous about, if you're trying to accomplish some goal with your family or do something, whatever it is that's challenging, that makes it worthwhile, and it's not going to be easy. And what I found, if it's something at home or if it's something at work, whatever it is, and it doesn't have to be a space shot, but I think the reason we can look towards sports and maybe the space program, in my case, is that it forces you into doing these things, because you cannot be successful and kind of wallow around without encountering difficulties and overcoming them, of not giving up, of working together where the team's success is your success, of sharing help when you can and asking for help when you need it, because it's not just you, it's also the team will suffer if you're not prepared or you're hurt or whatever it is. You got to fess up and get that help. And so I think that those things, and I think that's why we love sports, Mike, I think, is that we can see the humanity in it and take inspiration from it. We see an athlete that doesn't give up, that, we love that underdog story. The quarterback that was undrafted and now is, going to the Super Bowl, that we love those stories because we can see us in that story. We all, I think, have things we're trying to accomplish. Maybe some things, maybe the world thinks they're big things, like the Super Bowl, the world, or at least the United States, or now maybe other countries too, think that's a big deal. But that doesn't matter. If it's important to you, that's what matters. Space program is not, it matters to this, I like sports and everything, but I just wasn't I'm not that good of an athlete, but,
right.
But to me, the most important thing was the space program. And I think it's trying to find that passion, and then pursuing it, expect to be knocked down. Expect to have to come back and don't take no for an answer, and not give up. Expect to need help. I mean, you're not going to be able to do it alone, and you want to be a part of a team that's going to help you and that you can help them. And that was the thing I missed most about being an astronaut, is being a part of that team, because we really cared for each other and took care of each other. So I think no matter what it is you're trying to do in life, I think those basic principles of persistence, of teamwork, of speaking up when you see something, of taking time out to be amazed by the beauty of our planet and what's around us. I think these things apply, and that's been my experience. For example, when I speak to different audiences, they think it's cool, that I got to go really fast in space, and they want to know if I threw up or not or whatever. But I think what's most useful to them is some of these principles that will help them in their everyday life.
One of the principles you just mentioned that you kind of slid in there is that like no one does it alone. It's one of my first principles in life. It's one of our first principles here at Finding Mastery is nobody can do the extraordinary alone. It's too big and bold and multifaceted and complicated. Like you're not going to get it done alone. So figure out how to be a great teammate, and figure out how to like be in service to others as well. And like, if you're all hubbing in the same direction and there's clarity of what that direction is, like you got something. And so, yeah, right. Okay. And so speaking of sports here, assuming you're a Yankee fan?
It's a long story. Joe Torre.
Wait a minute. You can't. I know that's where I was going. Like you can't have one of the greatest Yankee coaches.
He also managed the Mets, Mike. He managed the Mets first.
Oh my God. You went to the Mets and with Joe Torre. That's unbelievable.
But I was raised by my family, particularly my Uncle Romeo, who's now over 100 years old, was an old New York Giants fan and hated the Yankees. And then the New York Giants moved, and he couldn't root for the Yankees. So when the Mets came around, he became this Met fan. And I was raised not to hate the Yankees. But I met Joe Torre when he was managing the Dodgers, and I asked him. I said, "When you grew up, were you a Yankee?" He goes, "No, I hated the Yankees." He hated the Yankees when he was a kid. He was a Giants fan living in Brooklyn, so he didn't like the Dodgers or the Brooklyn Dodgers. So, but he ended up managing the Yankees, of course, and he managed the Dodgers as well, the two teams he didn't like when he was a kid. But what I was going to say, it's a long story that what's happened to me is since meeting Joe and some of the people he's affiliated with and a lot of people with that organization, they're a class act. They had me throw out a pitch on the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, and I couldn't pass that up to throw a pitch out at Yankee Stadium. It's not something they do all the time. They only do it on special occasions. And they had the guy who caught my pitch was the guy who was on the mound. A guy named Jack Aker was the pitcher when they landed on the moon on the mound at Yankee Stadium, that moment when that happened. And they just treated us really well. And I've gotten to know a lot of the people behind the scenes there through Mr. Torre, and I have a lot of respect for the way they do things. So I root for them now, believe it or not, Mike. I want to see them win. I'm a Mets fan. But I no longer root against the Yankees. I like to see them do well because I really, I hate to admit it. Yeah, you can call me a cop out. I don't care. But once you get the neighborhood? Yeah, no, they would. A lot of them wouldn't agree with it. And my Uncle Romeo, I hope he doesn't listen to this, but he would be upset with me.
Yeah, but when Joe Torre, I wanted to read it out loud because it matters.
Yes,
He's one of the best coaches at the Yankees of all time, like historical great managers. And he says, Mike illustrates that through determination, sacrifices, and teamwork, no dream is too bold. Like, man, we could deconstruct that because you live with sacrifices, determination, and I think you're a great teammate. I would want to be on a team with you. I feel like you would be like, you would understand what matters to me and you would support and challenge me to be my best, knowing that like that's what you want as well, for me to understand you and what you're about, what your purpose is and where you come from and who you're doing what for, and like to support and challenge you. Feels like you like that challenge as well. Like, come on, this isn't the A game here now. Let's go. I feel like you'd be a great teammate, dude.
Thanks, Mike. I feel the same. We should go to space together. And I think the value of what you're saying, and hopefully what we're talking about together, is that it doesn't have to be just sports and flying the space. And that's what right. I try to tell people when I'm trying to, when I speak or through the book, is that you can have what I cherished most as an astronaut. I mean, the view of the planet was awesome, but it was fleeting. Even if you're up there for longer, some of my friends have been up there a long time, over almost a year at one point, and you're going to have to come home. And so at least nowadays you need to. But what I cherished most, it was the relationships I had and the culture we had. And as you described, the way we took care of each other. And there's no reason why everyone in the world can't have that. Treating your family
Flat
like your
out.
team, your family is your most important team. And that's the way it should be with your family. I'm not saying I'm a good example of that. I try, but but your family is your most important team. The people you work with, they're your team as well. And you can have that. You can have that same just joy in your life by building a team like that and having people that care about each other and admire each other and take care of each other. That's what I really miss the most about being an astronaut. I luckily have some of that in my life now, but not at that level. And I think that's what we should be striving for, is to, maybe we're not going to the moon together, you and I, but if we're going to do something together, why not treat it like that and do our best to make it successful and take care of each other and enjoy the ride and tell stories later about it when we're done. And that's what makes life worthwhile, I think. And anybody can have that.
Mike, you came strong in this conversation now. Like you represented the neighborhood well. You took care of family. Man. You took care of the future, the purpose for us. Like, this is great. Like, I'm so
Mike.
stoked to get to say it again.
It's all you, buddy. I'm telling you.
Yeah, right.
We started this interview. Yeah. I was actually, a little bit on the grumpy side, and you got it out of me, man. You're awesome. You were great. You really are. You're good. Yeah, I don't know if you know that or not, but you're good at this, buddy. Keep it up.
I want to figure out like next time. Are you back on Long Island?
Right now I'm in Manhattan, but where are you?
Yeah. No, I'm in LA. But next time I'm in your neighborhood. Like,
cool, man.
Let's grab
that'd be
something
fun
and hang. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Fun. So, listen, I appreciate you. The book that you've got is Dynamo. And so, like, I want to encourage, where do you want to send people to get it? Moonshot, a NASA astronaut's guide to achieving the impossible.
Wherever they buy books. Hopefully it's helpful to them. I hope this conversation, it was helpful to me, Mike. I hope it was helpful to your listeners or viewers or whatever's going on here. But hopefully it'll be helpful to them. And if they're interested in picking it up, they can go wherever they buy books. It could be Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your local bookshop. That's always a good place to go. Support your local bookshop. But wherever's easiest, it's sold everywhere. My website is MikeMassimino.com. If you want to get a hold of me, you can contact me through that website. I was the first guy to tweet from space. Take that, Neil Armstrong. Hey, so I'm active on, I try to be active on Twitter or X or whatever it is, and Instagram, LinkedIn, all over the place. So Facebook.
Take that, Neil Armstrong.
Yeah.
Oh my God. All right, good. And I'm going to follow up and send you the episode with Owen Eastwood that I mentioned earlier. Cool. I'm going to send that. And for folks that are listening on, it's like in the 200s, the mid 200s. It was December 2020 we released it, and I think you're going to love that. December 2020, somewhere in the mid 200s. And listen, this is awesome. I'm going to take you up on finding you next time I'm in Manhattan, or if you're in LA.
Thank you.
I'd love to host you as well. So, all right, man, thanks, I appreciate you, and thanks for leading the way from the front.
No, you're a good man. Thanks for taking care of me, and thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
All right, appreciate you.